we are joined by Staadecker, who's running for mayor. So you want to start with a 2-minute introduction?
So it was interesting, at one of the sessions last week, I think it was on Monday night, they asked the candidates, one of the questions was, when were you thinking of, what was that aha moment that you thought of becoming a mayor? And I thought the answers were really interesting because some of the people, one in particular said, I started thinking of this when I was 18 years old, and another said, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And my answer was that I actually started about thinking it in about a year and a half. And why? I served 2 terms on the Vashon Island School. We raised our children there at the public schools. And I realized that I understood the power of politics, but I didn't want to have the label of a politician. And what I saw happening in my city was that things were headed in the wrong direction. It started certainly with the tunnel. And what I thought the word that bothered me most of all was duplicity. And duplicity in a mayor is the exact opposite thing. And then there was an issue with Mohi. And I don't know if you recall what happened with Mohi, but the mayor wanted to defund them because they made a better deal at the state, and it created a 6-month problem. Parking was a significant issue to me, and we became the highest parking in the country. The bar opening, staying to 6 a.m. was baffling to me. And if I can just finish, what all that amounted to was that I thought we were headed in the wrong direction. Rather than sit on the couch, there comes a time in each person's life when they stand up and try to say, this is important to me. This was one of those times. My apologies.
Now we have 5 prepared questions, 2-minute answers to each of these, and Evan, will you be number 1?
What is your strategy for implementing, leveraging, and perhaps improving the incentive zoning program to create diverse neighborhoods and ensure affordable housing?
The city is going to grow over the next 20 years, and I think this is critical for the next mayor to look at, not the next 6 months, but what you implement today, how it pays off in the next 10 or 15 years. Right now, what I see happening is 2 bubbles. A bubble on the top of the very wealthy and a bubble on the bottom for the concentrating a lot of energy and incentives to create homeless shelters. It's a noble idea, and no one should ever stop working from the bottom up. But we also have to be very realistic about the middle. And it's the middle that it holds a society together. And if you study civilizations that have imploded, it was the lack of the middle. It was a high-low end and a high-up end. So if you are to believe that just incentive zoning will create enough income to build middle-income housing, I don't agree with that. It's a step in the right direction. It's the power of a city to use some money, but it is certainly not enough. Do I have all the answers? No, but I can tell you that currently we just won't generate enough income from incentive zoning to create a strong middle class. What will create a strong middle class is jobs, not just incentive zoning, because family wage jobs, and if they increase, will create enough income for the middle class to live in.
In your view, what is the city's role in ensuring equal educational and achievement opportunities in Seattle?
There's a great quote by a gentleman by the name of Frederick Douglass, who said, "It is far easier to educate a child than to repair a broken adult." And that stays with me because education opens doors of opportunities for all students. I certainly saw that when I served on the National Island School Board, and I was actually very proud that we became School Board of the Year for Washington State. Right now, the system is if you have a child and you're college educated, and these aren't exact figures, but it would give you a sense, your child may enter kindergarten with a 10,000 word vocabulary. Another person who's struggling holding down 2 or 3 jobs may enter with a 2,000 word vocabulary, their children. And the teacher is expected to balance that in 1 year. If they are not reading by 3rd grade level and not doing 4th grade level math, at those key points, the road begins to slip. So early education is absolutely critical at the start, and I believe every mayoral candidate is backing heavily investments in early education. I actually understand that one very well because I served as chair of Puget Sound ESD, which raised $20 million to open one of the finest early ed schools, and it's in White Center. And it's a thing called Educare. I'm thrilled that I'm going to be invited back to Washington, D.C. to talk about our school in relation to all the other educators, and that's in June 11th. Education will be critical to our school, to raising the level of our kids. Not that they all have to go to college, but they should have the opportunity to go to college. And the investment is with the teacher. That is the most critical area of education, investment in the teacher.
Question number 3.
Voters passed the Parks and Green Spaces levy in 2008, yet we've experienced cutbacks in staffing and facilities since then. When the levy is up for renewal next year, how can it be constructed to assure voters that their tax dollars will be allocated wisely?
I think that question is even a larger one because it could also apply to bridging the gap money. People are concerned that they signed up for tax dollars and they believe in education, they believe in parks, they believe in repairing roads. But when they don't see an improvement in those, they become very concerned. We as citizens saying, how are you spending our money? So the key issue to me, and one of the overarching issues that I think this election is the quality and personal characteristics of who is going to lead us. Trust must be reestablished. There must be absolute guidelines and transparency so that you as a voter can look at that money and see where it went. If we don't invest in parks, it is the same to me as graffiti on a building, especially in a down economy, because people want to feel good about the city they live in. And sometimes when they're under distress, parks can create the greatest sense of, I'm part of the whole. So an investment in parks is key. Getting back to your question, we've got to convince voters that we're handling their money well, and I think it comes from words like trust, authenticity, transparency. And I don't use those words lightly. They are absolutely going to be key in the next, I have 30 seconds or I'm over? 30. So to me, that's absolutely key in our next election of mayor. I think the next 4 years will set in motion what Seattle will become like in the next 10 to 15 years. I think your job is so critical in terms of your endorsement, because I think you have to signal who is going to be the best leader to stimulate a population, and I believe in that. Who's going to revitalize? Who's going to energize people? And I think that at least in my meetings with people from all over the city, that's what they're waiting for. That's what they're thirsting for.
David, number 4.
There will likely be two types of election reform on the ballot this fall. District elections and public financing of campaigns. Do you support either of these, or both, and why?
Public financing of campaigns, yes. Let's get on to districting. This one is difficult. And the reason it's difficult, and I will tell you, I have called both Boston and Denver to find out what has been their experience. And the experience is really mixed. So you know all the good reasons. You can campaign for less money, you represent a district, you can doorbell, you represent the people of Ballard, and you go out and fight for them. And I understand that. I ask you to dig deeper. What you are going to wind up with is a very bifurcated city council. You are going to wind up with everyone trying to represent their district stronger than the city as a whole. The key is to elect great city council people who can look at the broad spectrum. Because if I start battling you, and you're in West Seattle, and I'm in Ballard, we are going to not work for the city as a whole. And what was interesting, what I learned in these discussions with both Denver and Boston, was that the mayor became stronger. It gave him a trump card. So for example, they said, in Denver said, our mayor was able to go to you and say, I will give you a park in West Seattle, but I need your vote on this. And it created a very divisive system. So I would say be very careful, and I would not be personally against district.
Right. Elizabeth, number 5.
What are your specific recommendations for selecting a police chief and restoring public confidence in our police department?
Every mayor that I met with said, appointing your police chief is the most important and the most difficult appointment you will deal with. Everyone was consistent that it takes more time than you ever envisioned when you started. To me, there's two overarching issues about this election, and I hope I get a chance more than 30 seconds to tell you what I consider the 6 pillars. That's the second overarching issue. The first overarching issue to me is the quality of the person you elect. What kind of personal character traits do they have? And I think they are key to lead with trust, authenticity, collaboration, vitality, and the ability, and if you have those, you can inspire a population because they will believe in you. Those are the qualities that I think I have, and that are important to me in the department heads I would select. Not only the police chief, but all the way through. And if you can start from that basis with the quality of the person, that's a good beginning. The second part is, we have a system now that we're in trouble, so we call the police. And it has to be the inverse of that. What I mean by that is we have to have a preventative police force. We have to meet with people before things happen. We need more policemen on the streets. We need them to relate closely to the neighborhoods and to build a sense of trust. I don't know if any of you saw 60 Minutes last night about a city in Massachusetts that had tremendous drug problems. Those police went out and created a new system with residents. This is exactly what went wrong at the issue of Columbia City when Bellevue came in, and our police force should have alerted our very own citizens of what was happening, and they missed a grand opportunity. So the two things, quality of the person you select, transparency, and the fact that we must get preventative rather than just punitive.
So now we'll open up to follow-up questions from the executive board. These are 1-minute answers. Let's see, Elizabeth first. Go ahead.
Yes, you mentioned, let's see, that they need to create family wage jobs to create a middle class.
Yes.
What ideas do you have for creating those kind of jobs?
I got plenty. So this one's a good one because this one's in my wheelhouse. For the last 35 years, that's the job that I have as a commercial real estate broker. My whole 35 years has been bringing either in businesses or expanding businesses throughout greater Seattle, in fact, throughout King County. So my job is to go out and align firms who are looking at the West Coast and saying, you're basically a chief salesperson. And I think that's very critical in the next mayor, to be the lead champion of Seattle. So I have gone out and actually met with these companies, know what it takes to get them here, and it's going to be critical. The next 5 years, you are going to see such competition from cities, be it Portland, San Jose, Denver, Austin, because they are going to want the jobs. A mayor must be proactive and not reactive. Our biggest issue that we have in Seattle, and it has existed for some time, is complacency, and we can't afford to be complacent.
John, and then Clayton.
Were you mayor last year? How would you have supported the paid employer sick leave legislation?
Yes, it's a noble idea, it's an important idea, but where I think the business community felt less empowered was they felt that it was approved too quickly. They didn't have enough input from their perspective. So the unintended consequences are many of the firms who already had a policy like that, or didn't, they traded it for vacation days and said, you know, we've now been mandated where we've got to do sick leave, so we're going to change our vacation policies. Many people who got sick, and the issue was focused just on food service handlers. That was the big issue that was created. Food service handlers represent a portion, but not all. So what I would do is, yes, I would back it. I would not increase it, but I want a broader discussion of, now that a year has gone by, what have we done right and how can we improve it? So I would keep it, but improve it with input from the people who are actually instituting it and what are their issues.
Clayton and Jack.
I'm curious how you would have handled, or the Department of Justice intervention with respect to the police had you been there.
Should have never happened in the first place. We missed an opportunity to correct way before the Department of Justice got involved. And what I think is really interesting, Merrick Bob, who's now the head, said something very interesting about the new police chief, the interim police chief. He said, I'm giving, and I wish I knew the exact word he used, but it was in the Seattle Times. He is very forward-thinking and moving in the right direction. What he said about our mayor was telling. He said, our relationship is improving. That is not what we want to have happen. Collaboration is going to be an absolute key for cities to get ahead. And a combative attitude is just not the right attitude for embracing police reform, nor is it good for the citizens who again see a divisiveness in our city that they don't expect of a city of this kind of quality. And the mayor has to be a person who is collaborative and steps up to, this is going to be a world-class city. We need a world-class mayor.
Jack, final question?
It's been a week since your appearance at the Mayor's Forum in South Seattle, and
you want to know a picture I have on my iPhone?
Yeah. Well, it does have. I guess you said you just found out about the gender pay gap in Seattle.
Yes.
So since a week has gone by, have you come up with any?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that. I'm really thrilled. So I was not aware of a gender pay gap that exists throughout the city at whatever level. And the answer I would have given is, do I have an immediate or slick answer for you how to solve that? No. But what a mayor should do when faced with a problem that's new on the horizon is to gather the right people to study that problem and come to a consensus. So in my, the answer I wish I would have made would be, I would like to have a broad spectrum of women who have experienced this. I would like to have from small companies to large companies represented to sit around the table. And basically what I'd like to do is collect a diverse group to come up with recommendations how to solve that. What I did say, and underlying that, is the importance of a strong education to get those jobs. Because if you've got a skill, you can demand higher wages if you have a strong skill. So I do believe in education. But if that's not happening today, and Seattle is one of the laggards across the country, which was news to me, we need to put together a team to try to understand how we can improve that with both business and women who are suffering through that. That's the answer I wish I would have given.
Okay, so we're about out of time. If you want to take 30 seconds for a closing statement.
I'm going to need more. I had 18 seconds on 30 seconds. Your job is very critical for an outsider, for somebody who's not a politician. This hasn't been a level playing field, and I've had to work on that since day one in October. Democratic ideals have been built on a level playing field. I ask your courage to pick the very best person, not who you have potentially given endorsements in the past, but who can lead this city, who has the quality and the charisma and the skills to do this. And I'm sorry we didn't have a chance to talk about the skills that I think I bring to the table. I thank you very much for today. Be courageous. Both look at the mind and the heart of the people that's addressing you. Who can lead the city? I thank you.
Thank you very much.